Now it is that.
We'll go ahead and call the June 18th board work session to order here. We'll start off with roll call.
Kevin Alltucker,
Here.
Denise Diamond,
Here.
Austin Fulnagi,
Here.
Lisa Fragala,
Here.
Steve Mattel,
Here.
Zach Mulholland.
Here. Excellent. All right, we'll now move on to the land recognition. Kevin Alltucker.
I'd like to start our meeting with the acknowledgement that the land we are on is the traditional homelands of the Kalapuya people. The Kalapuya were stewards of this very land for over 14,000 years before their traditional way of life was forever disrupted. We start our meeting with humility and reverence for the original inhabitants, the Kalapuya.
Thank you very much. I need a motion for the adoption of the agenda.
I'll move to adopt the agenda.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor for the adoption of the agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstention? Seeing none. Just note the equity lens and the equity lens documents, as well as the equity lens questions. There was no responses to information requests, so we will, or no documents for information requests, so we'll move right into discussion items. We'll start with discussion item A, the President AI Task Force. Dr. Balger?
Yes, good evening, everyone. I want to introduce Shelley Tinkham, Dr. Tinkham, and also Kevin Steves, I think he's there as well, to present to you about the President's Task Force on Artificial Intelligence. And I'm excited for this presentation. I hope you are too. So Dr. Tinkham.
Thank you, Dr. Balger. Good evening, board members.
Thank you for allowing us to be here and speak with you tonight.
Next slide, please. So Kevin and I are to be co-chairs for the President's Task Force on Artificial Intelligence. I wanted to give you a bit of a background on the impetus for this task force and why we're here today. So last summer, I was at a HEC meeting in Bend, and HEC had asked the institutions to come together and have a conversation about AI. Saunders Studio, a consultant group that we continue to work for, gave a keynote address. And we were just first learning about artificial intelligence. And it dawned on me at that point in time that this was going to be incredibly disruptive to education. Disruptive, both positive. It has some positives and some perhaps some negatives. There's a cost and there's benefits to it. But really what struck me at that meeting, there was a gentleman there from Oxford, a fine institution, you may have heard of it. And they had said that they were going back to Blue Books in order to assure that students were not cheating. And that really bothered me. And I was like, certainly we can do better than that. We know that Blue Books, I've been Blue Booked to death in my life. You're lorded over by a proctor and people make sure that you're doing your own work. It's very poor assessment, and we know that. And we've made so many gains in assessment that I was like, oh, that seems very reactionary to me, and we can do better. And we definitely want community colleges driving the agenda of how we're going to respond to AI, because we serve the students who are the most vulnerable and who might have the most to lose with this new technology and perhaps the most to gain. So I went back to campus, and Dr. Balger and I started talking about this, and we realized that in order to respond effectively, we needed a task force, and we needed to do it immediately. And so the question for the task force is very simple. How can Lane Community College effectively respond to and integrate AI into our college to support and enhance the student experience? So all of this is from the student perspective. We have a number of objectives up there that we will talk throughout this presentation. We wanted to make sure that we were incorporating AI,
that we were going to safeguard academic integrity, but that we were also going to be ethical with it and also consider how AI can help us with our workflows. The membership, it was very important. We would have equal representation from all groups. We would have 5 faculty members, 5 staff, five administrators. I think we have we have 4 members of the task force here today. 5 students, and 2 ex officios, myself and Kevin. We have struggled a bit getting student involvement. And here's something that we've learned. Students don't participate like we participate. And so for us to be equitable, we have to change what does the table look like. So we have to go to them. They're not always going to be able to come to us at a meeting because they have classes, they have work, they're taking care of their families. So Kevin and I have been going out. We did go to a Student Government Association meeting. I know Kevin is much more involved in this work than I am. He's really doing the heavy lift, but boots on the ground, and he's been meeting with students quite extensively. So that provides the overview. We are going to start with an exercise that Kevin designed for the task force, probably during one of our very first meetings. Can we go to the next slide? And Kevin, would you like to introduce this?
Sure. A great way to show a lot of the limitations and concerns around AI is through the use of images. And so we put in a prompt, and this prompt and image was created back when we had this discussion with the task force. I think this was either January or February. And we asked it to create an image of a community college classroom in Eugene, Oregon. And so we're asking you as a board, and we wanted to start off and actually say, this is a conversation and discussion. We don't want to report to you. So we want you to interact and ask questions and have comments along the way. This is a big topic. So what do you interpret from this image? And we shouldn't have given the second question because that introduces our own biases, right? But what do you see in this image? And if you can see it clearly, I'd love to have some responses from the board to see what is pointing out to you. Kevin.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed looking at this and kind of pondering what I was looking at. First of all, I didn't realize there was a river running through the campus. I thought that was interesting. But the bigger issue for me was that most of the students and the instructor appear to be white. And I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah. I also saw more like traditional students as opposed to non-traditional students as well. And that and a lot of leaves. I don't know what class this is, but
Right. But potential stereotypes in those.
Exactly.
leaves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lisa.
They're all looking at the professor. I don't know if that actually happens in the class anymore. And
Yeah, they should be looking at their phones, right?
Right. And it looks like most of them have paper or something on the desks rather than like laptops, or maybe one person has a tablet. I'm also really interested in the gender balance. It looks like, there's 5 people who I might perceive as male identifying and 4 as female identifying. And I guess I wonder, are our science classes that equally balanced? Yeah.
Question.
It overall just looks like the kind of image conjured up by a marketing firm like 25 years ago.
If you look closely too, you'll see it's not perfect. The girl's hand in the front right corner here, it kind of comes out of nowhere. She has 2 hands, I think, up on her face.
Oh, yeah.
So there's things like that. If you look closely enough at the feet and the legs are not going to be perfect. Probably there's a chair that's missing a leg. And so there's a lot of hallucinations in this. And when we say hallucinations, it makes things up. It tries to find answers for you. It wants to make you happy. And so it tries to find that answer for you to give you what you think you want. And so it hallucinates quite a bit, or it can hallucinate quite a bit. It has potential to really show bias in its outputs. The bias is there based on those who created the algorithm, the predictions of the data that's pulling from and create this image. And also the bias of those that train the data center as well. So the data that goes in there. There's potential for copyright, right? It's trained on copyright data. And so there's ethical debates around that and if that's appropriate or not. And there's a lot of environmental impacts as well when we use AI. We'll talk a little bit more about that when I go through the timeline. But so there's a lot of things just in the images that we can bring up. And I really encourage faculty to kind of start here. If they're not sure how to approach this conversation with their students, start with the picture and just talk about the picture. What are the things that we're finding and seeing inside of this image? And then how does that open the conversation up to go further with that? Really starting to understand the limitations and considerations around AI so that we can help our students navigate what those pitfalls are as well.
If I can, and what we've learned is, we've been told it's most important to concentrate on allowing people to play with AI so that they know what it can do. I also think it's really important to know what it actually is. And it is a language model, it's a predictive model, and it's pulling data from a matrix. So what it's trying to do is predict the next word or the next image. It's not necessarily truthful. It wants to give you what you want, just as if you're in a conversation with someone and you might not quite know the answer and you might make something up. So it's not always truthful or accurate. Okay. Do we want to go to the next slide?
I think so, unless there's any last thoughts on this image or anything that's come to mind for you.
Not seeing any.
Okay, next slide. This is all you.
Yeah. So this isn't the best example of my design work, so I apologize. This is a lot of information trying to give you a snapshot of where we've been over the last not even quite a year. For me, it actually starts back in fall of 2022. President Bolger brought in a keynote, Scott Van Pelt, who with Arthur Levine wrote The Great Upheaval of Higher Education. Within that book, there's a section that speaks to AI. And when that first came out and I saw and I heard the keynote, I will be honest, I thought AI sci-fi, this is years away. This isn't something that maybe we need to pay attention to right now. There's a lot of other priorities out there that we really need to focus on. Well, then November of 22 hit, and that's when ChatGPT hit the headlines. And then you probably saw shortly after there was an article about, is this the death of the college essay? We really needed to pay attention at that point. And so when we came back from that break, we started discussions in the Center for Teaching and Learning with faculty around what is this technology? What are the implications around teaching and learning? And then we kind of just started from there. Last year at fall of 23, the fall in service, I'll just kind of briefly go over the key points here for you. Is when the AI task force was announced, where Shelley and myself were named as co-chairs. We immediately got through and started to create members using an equity lens with equal representation from each stakeholder group. In that first meeting of November, it was more about what is the scope and objectives of this task force, but more importantly, where we spent the majority, 90% of our discussion is, why are we here? So you saw the call for action to join this presidential AI task force. Why were you interested in joining that call? What was the conversation around it? A lot of us were on the same page with a lot of the same concerns, excitement, and saw the potentials, but also we're really concerned around the limitations. So a lot of us, I think, are on the same page going forward, which allowed us to really start, I think, building that community within the task force, because we knew going forward, we were going to have some difficult conversations to grapple with going ahead of this. Following that, we came back from break, and in January, we just wanted to get on the same page and understand what is AI as a tool, as a technology. And CIT instructor Brian Bird walked us through a lesson on explaining the background of that technology and understanding it. From there, we started to really get into conversations around data security and privacy. So we wanted to ask questions around how much data is okay to share. And when we share that data, how do we ensure that it's secure and that we are able to trust that technology with that sensitive level of data? Let me actually look at my notes here real quick. Sorry. Do you have anything to add? Okay.
And then in March, we talked about ethics and AI, and Claire Dannenbaum and Ian Coronado led that discussion.
Yeah, and that's where we picked up a lot more around the bias and hallucinations, copyright potential issues. And then what we need to have more conversation around, but we started to understand was around the environmental concerns and potentials around the use of AI technologies. April, even though having all of these discussions around the ethical pieces of it and understanding what there's a lot of limitations and considerations around the technology, we found that through the discussions, AI is ubiquitous in the workflow, that it's already implemented quite deeply, that a lot of users will use AI and they need to feel safe and understand that it's okay to use it before they'll allow you to know how they're using it and collaborate with you in that use. And that's the exact same story for our students as well. If they're not sure if it's appropriate to use in a course, they will still use it. They just may not be very open and upfront in how they use it, and where we have a lot of concerns around academic integrity and dishonesty. But if we treat the tool as we want to help you from over relying on this tool and help guide you in your usage of it, it's a much different approach, and where they're much more open about how they use it, if they use it. And we can have conversations around that and help them understand how to ethically and appropriate use this technology. And so that was really what I think the conversation was in April, and within our own staff and our own task force, led by the marketing team and how they're using AI, just to show that it's built in through all of the workflow and increasingly more so. You've probably seen recent advertisements around Apple Intelligence coming out in the fall. That's an AI that I think once we have access to it, that it'll become even more so as a normal technology and normal tool that our students and our stakeholders will all use this technology in a lot of different ways. May, thank you. In May, we hosted a joint task force summit with Lynn Benton Community College and Lane Community College on Lane Community College's campus. I think we had about 30 people over in the Center for Teaching and Learning. Really wanted to share about lessons learned so far, what our shared objectives were, collaboration on work groups, how we can kind of broaden the reach of each of the task forces, and then starting to support a community of practice around application of artificial intelligence, whether we are adopting and adapting our instruction and workflow to leverage this technology, or are we finding ways to mitigate it and avoid the technology? So both areas, there's no one answer to this technology, as you'll find out. And then in June, we came together as a task force, one final meeting, just as a reflection and looking forward. And to be honest, it was a lot of summarization to get the points out for this presentation. What were the lessons learned from this task force? What did we want to make sure that we shared in this presentation and talking with the board, and then also moving forward in the next steps? This summer, we will have a half-day retreat with the task force down at the downtown center, which we hope to bring Saunders Studio back in to help us with some visioneering and looking at next steps going ahead. And then the last three parts are really exciting. There's the ATC Fusion Lab, which is where we realized through the work of the AI task force and those discussions coming out, and my work as an instructional designer with the Academic Technology Center, we wanted to re-envision the space we have as an ATC classroom to be a fusion lab. And it's not an AI-focused lab, it's an emergent technology-focused lab. So we look at all different types of emergent technologies, but right now, AI obviously has a focus and a priority. This is a lab where we're really trying to partner with IT and getting some kind of off-the-grid server space where we can install small language models or other open source models and play with them on the back end and see what they do and how they work. There's a lot of environmental concerns around the training of large language models and then the maintenance of large language models. But I think sometimes we can ask ourselves, do we need to take the train or can we just ride a bike? And I think a lot of times we can just ride a bike. And that's where the Apple Intelligence is really built from. There's a lot of small little tiny AIs built into the device that work locally without having to go out to the cloud. And then when you need to go out to the cloud, you can. That's, I think, the backbone behind the Apple Intelligence. And I think kind of what I would really like to understand and do within the Fusion Lab. Not that we can replicate Apple, but we can at least test those things and those technologies and see where we can take them. Yeah.
And if I can jump in, the Fusion Lab came up as a recommendation. If you notice, our product that we have to produce is in spring of 2025. We need to provide up to 10 recommendations to the president and how we think, Lane should go forward. That might include policy, could include procedure, new programs. But as we were doing the work, there were things that were coming up. And one of the things that came up was people need a safe place to play with the technology. And hence the ATC Fusion Lab was developed as a place where people can go in and learn about the technology. I also wanted to just give you a little bit of background on why we developed this as a 2-year task force. And that was because this technology is changing so quickly. We didn't want to be too reactionary. There have been some institutions that have developed policies that they have rescinded almost as quickly as they develop them because they're already out of date or that they're not feasible. So for example, banning AI on campus is most likely it's not going to work. And there were institutions that did, and they had to unban it. There were institutions that had this idea that they could detect AI. You cannot. There is no mechanism out there that can do that. So hence, the reason for the measured response is to recognize that this is changing very rapidly, and we want to be responsive and not reactionary. However, when things happen and we need to do something like the Fusion Lab, we've gone forward.
The last part real quick are just on the work groups. So you have a little bit more of an understanding. What we're trying to do there is we realize there's a lot that we need to learn. It's like drinking from a fire hose at some points, trying to keep up with. And so trying to broaden our reach. Hopefully we'll have a couple of members from the task force in each one of the work groups, but then we can open those work groups up to the campus community and further open participation because there is a lot of interest in this work and a lot of voice that wants to be heard. Those work groups right now are ethical and integrity concerns, legal and compliance issues, educational applications and pedagogy, administrative and strategic considerations, and then community partnerships and workforce development. All of this information too, I forgot to mention, if you go to lancc.edu/AI task force, everything is right there as far as our notes and recordings and all of the work group information. Yeah.
Next slide.
Mhm.
Next slide, please.
All right.
All right.
Any questions or further discussion?
Do you want to provide information on the prompt? I mean, that was your prompt.
Yeah, so AI has bias and it's not always right. And like we talked about, it has copyright and all these things. And I think what we've likened it to is a freight train that's coming through. We cannot slow it down. We could try to slow it down through banning or that, but that's not going to happen. I think the best that we could do is to grab on and hold on for dear life and see what happens. And why I say this is because I think we need to understand this as a co-intelligence or a alien intelligence I've heard in a book that we're reading, and that how do we evolve or adapt to this new type of technology, and that the way that we can collaborate with it, the way that we can interact with it, you have to take it with a grain of salt, just as you would interact with a person, another human being. They're not perfect. They also have bias. They were trained and educated on copyright material as well. And so there's all these different things. And so when you interact with it, and that's, I think, where the dangers are. As it's us with expertise, we may be able to see really quickly where the limitations are and where the pitfalls may be, but our students are developing that expertise. And so they may not. And its outputs sound very rational, very realistic, very humanistic. And so how do we train our students to question everything, to not just take things blindly and accept them as is? And how do we develop that critical thinking around what this technology provides? So, yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, Kevin.
First of all, thank you for the presentation and thank you for your approach to this issue. Always keeping the students front and center and trying to figure out how to use the technology for good. I really appreciate that approach. Obviously, one of the opportunities is to figure out how AI will affect assessments, in coursework. It's fascinating. I think there are many, many opportunities. And I really appreciate your approach of not being, trying to ban it or be afraid of it, but to learn about it and see how, just as your opening slide mentioned, how we can enhance the student experience. So thank you.
Listen, Steve.
Also, thank you for the presentation. I was just thinking, just as you were presenting, that, there might be benefit in looking back, right? Not just looking forward, because there's been other disruptive technologies. The calculator probably really freaked people out whenever that was first introduced, and probably math, and physics and other kinds of teachers really thought that, that's the death of their subjects. And of course, it hasn't been. So, you know, it would be interesting to, you know, to draw parallels from past, you know, disruptive technologies in the classroom.
Yeah, I agree. During our retreat with Lynn Benton, I had the opportunity to listen to two composition instructors, one from Lane Community College, one from Lynn Benton, talk about their approaches to how they're incorporating the technology into their composition courses. And both instructors are using it a little bit differently, but they are utilizing it to have students start off with it to prompt the technology. And they're using the examples that's being provided. They're asking the students to critique it for its weaknesses. So I thought that was very interesting. So there are ways that we can utilize it well. The book that we read together, you and I read it together, and now the task force is using it. It's called Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mullock. He's at Wharton. And one of the things that he noticed is, you know, there is concern about foundational skills with students and Willis erode foundational skills. And he found actually the opposite, that students that were some of his weakest students were actually gaining with using the technology. He wanted them to use it. He was guiding them on how to use it, and the students were benefiting from that. So it was actually lessening the gap between his high achievers and his lowest performers in the class. I do recognize, however, that concern. And, you know, I think I've conceded that there might be places and times where we just have to do things face to face. And I question whether or not this technology will actually drive us in that direction as well, that people might want to return to the classroom.
I'd like to add on to that too. A point I wanted to make sure to make is I think what you're kind of hinting at is the critical need of professional development, that our faculty and staff won't be able to help support students in navigating what this technology is, unless they themselves have a very clear understanding of what it is and what the limitations and potentials are. Yeah.
Excellent. We'll go Denise and then Lisa. Denise?
Thank you. And I also agree that the direction and focus of the task force and looking at multiple pros and cons is really useful. It's very broad. I have heard some phrases that I think would be really useful for training, both for students and faculty and staff, which is what AI is and can potentially do, question mark, and what it is not. I think it is, you know, I think some of those may be facts, like, for example, stating that you cannot discover, so to say, if someone is in fact using AI. I just think some foundational data, as it is known, I'm sure it will continue to change, but just putting some foundation to people's understanding, I think is always very, very useful, because I do think the assessment pieces, just being in literature, and the whole issue of plagiarism and borrowing and and all of that as students write research papers and compositions, this will, you know, continue to be very challenging in this domain.
Excellent. Thank you. Lisa?
Yeah, I appreciate the emphasis on seeing it as a tool. I think that is the right direction to be heading in. I noticed that the last bullet for objectives was ensuring and promoting equity, diversity, and inclusion in this technological landscape, and specifically utilizing Lane's equity lens. And so I'm curious how that's happened, or if you could just speak to that objective.
Sure. Yeah, I can speak for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think what we realize is that AI impacts every discipline very differently. And so how one faculty might approach this technology is very different from another faculty outside of different disciplines, but even within the discipline itself. You may have very different faculty from within that teach very different ways. And so recognizing that it's a very personal decision in how we use AI, if we use AI, and how to adopt it or adapt our instruction or with our workflow, and recognizing that and holding value for that piece. For the faculty council, the way that we applied the equity lens in the membership formation was when we received statements of interest from faculty members. I can't remember how many statements we had, but we had faculty council review those statements and ask them to apply the equity lens in making that appointment for that task force, realizing that every discipline is very different and that every discipline really needs a voice at the table, but we only have so many seats. And so how do we equitably do that? And then also, I think that's where we feel we really need to do more intentional outreach to different stakeholder groups so that we can understand the various different viewpoints and approaches to this. And what the different technologies can do as far as also through equity and diversity. There's a lot of potentials there, but also we found there's a lot of limitations as well with the finding the bias and outputs and how they can be misinformation. So did you want to add?
Yeah, I would add as well, with the faculty representatives, we have 2 part-time faculty, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yes.
Yes, and we have ESL is represented, which I thought was very important because these are some of our more we're going to say non-traditional students or students who may have the most challenges with using AI. One of the things that I've learned is those individuals who can use AI well and who are going to benefit the most typically have the highest literacy skills. And so it's going to be very important for us to make sure that students have the skills they need to be able to actually use the technology. I mean, because it is a language model, it's like if you have a really good background in stats or research, you can really get a lot out of it because you have to tell it exactly what you want and you have to give it a persona and continue to drive down. So what that underscores to me is literacy, foundational literacy is going to become even more important as we move forward in higher education. That has a huge impact in terms of equity. We have to make sure that our literacy skills are very high.
All right. Zach?
Can you speak to opportunities to train students to actively use these tools in the classroom? And then what opportunities you're seeing to potentially train students to create these tools in the future?
Do you want to talk about Brian's?
Well, I'll speak a little and then, yeah. So we've already, Brian Bird, he's on the task force, he's in CIT, correct? He has developed courses in AI. So we've already done that. We haven't, I don't believe there's a program specifically right now in development, but we do have courses so that students can start learning how to build these sorts of models. Do you want to do the rest?
The other side too of it, I think through that Fusion Lab, one of the things that we're hoping to do is one, create modules that faculty can take and import directly into their course. So if they want to have a module on understanding some of the ethical considerations around AI, they can take that and put that into their Moodle shell. We also want to have open workshops and seminars through the Fusion Lab where students are also invited to have conversations with us and discussions. If they have a faculty mentor, so someone that can come in and explain what their AI use policy is and what's appropriate for their course and that, then can I help them in sifting through and understanding how to use AI appropriately based on their instructor's use course policy. I say faculty mentor because I'm happy to have students come in the lab and show them AI, but I wouldn't want to show them something that contradicts something their faculty is telling them may be inappropriate use.
If I can add, I think our students are much more adept than what we give them, sometimes than we give them credit for. Kevin and I went to an SGA meeting and we just asked students, like, what do you know about AI? How are you using it? Students are using this and they're using it in a very ethical way. Some students are using it to help with study guides. They seem to very much recognize that there's limitations to it, that they need to check with their faculty. I think one student said the problem of plagiarism was here well before this, and that students who are prone to do that, well, you've always had that problem. And there are students who are not going to cheat themselves out of an education. So I do think our students, even without us being really intentional, they know they're educating themselves.
So overall, I know we're going to discuss this again, quite frankly, because of the changes, the rapid aspects of these changes and so forth. And I'm really curious about the policy ideas and recommendations that we as a board can maybe undertake with this. So I think that's a broader discussion, but I really appreciate giving us an update. I've been curious about this task force for quite some time and look forward to future discussions.
Thanks, I appreciate it. And I do want to invite you all to the Fusion Lab. So come in, the door's open. It's a conversation that we just started about what is the technology, and we take some use cases that you're working on and try to use AI and see what we can do with it. It's about understanding the potentials of it. So please, you're all invited to join us in the Fusion Lab.
Where physically are you located?
We are in the center building, second floor, right next to JJ's Coffee. We're connected with the ATC Support Center. So it's the ATC Classroom, Center 219.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Moving on to a broader discussion about our prioritization discussion we had, and more specifically Building 12. Dr. Bulger?
Yes, I would like to have Kara Flass and Jennifer Hayward may be with you, Kara. I'm not sure about that. But you may recall, the board may recall that Building 12, well, the bond prioritization was talked about with the board roughly 2 months ago or so. We wanted to bring back specifically Building 12 and give you some additional information on that. So I'm going to turn it over to Kara to start that.
Yes, and Jennifer's out. She just had a procedure on her shoulder, so she's not feeling well. She might be listening from home, but she is here in spirit with us. But what I provided in your packet as information was an update on Building 12. We had talked about the safety concerns related to that building. Went back, had discussions with the department team and then external contractors that are already working on this building, and tried to provide a write-up in what I'm going to call layman's terms that Kara can understand. So hopefully everyone else can, and give you just kind of graphical of some of the issues that are related to this building, what our plan is specifically in play. So I'll go through the general detail. If you have more questions, please feel free to ask, and we will provide information as I can. So I included the issue with Building 12, which, if you're familiar with which one that is that it's, my understanding, it's two buildings. So it's a 1966 building with a 1970s add-on. The concern is the 1970s add-on has the structural issues with the roofing. So what they found in 2021 was the roof stability is questionable after 4 inches of snow. So that's where we would know what the impact would be if there's concerns. So there was shoring done to alleviate some of that, but that's guaranteed for 2 years. So we're coming up on the 2 years. I provided a little graphical, which he's smart. Look at him there, of what the building is. So that side with the yellow, that's the central utility plant that we've discussed. It's in the older 1966 portion. That portion of the building is more structurally sound than the 1970s. So what the proposal would be is to demolish essentially that red section and provide more structural integrity into that 1966, which does have all the central utilities that we do need on campus. If you scroll down just a little bit, Brett, to the other, this is essentially just a write-up of what it would look like. Building 12 will now be that smaller square, which will include the 1966 portion, and then the blue and some of the it's kind of hard to read, but some of the black sections, that's going to be leveling it out. It'll provide emergency access, which law enforcement, sheriff's department is really anxious for us to have that particular access to that building. It'll level it out and provide walkway access, and essentially that part of that building will be gone. So in order to make all of that happen, is we have to relocate first the iTech building. Most of the staff in that building are going to the iTech building, so that'll take care of that. Public safety, there's a small amount of staff that are still in there, so we will relocate them into another building, and we're hoping in the fall. I have an action plan. There you go. Already in there. We're hoping to bring this back in July, let you vote on this particular topic, and then finalize the demolition of the building, and then start getting permitting. And then spring of 2025 is when we will have all of public safety relocated. When the ITech building is up and going, that portion, those staff will all be moved out of that building into the other one. So at the same time, we have to get public safety moved into another building. So we have to get that other building going at the same time and have it ready to go. It's a really long story short. Does that make some sense?
Absolutely. Any discussion? Zach.
So my understanding is that if we do get over 4 inches of snow, there's some chance of catastrophic failure that could then bring down the 1960s portion as well. Is that accurate?
The portion, I'm gonna look at Tom, the portion of the building that is the 1970s portion, which has public safety in there. That's the section that is a concern. And so it wouldn't be the section with the central utilities plant, but he could probably talk.
The roof structure is tied together. There's less likely to be catastrophic damage in that portion of the building, but because all the utilities are tied together, that whole building would have to be shut down until you could determine how much damage would have happened to it. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, so I guess I'm just trying to think if there are ways to separate and make it so that they're not as connected now, but it sounds like it's just, we just got to wait until we can get it done, and fingers crossed that we don't have any major issues this winter.
Yeah.
Lisa.
And there is a plan in place if there is to locate the staff out of that building quickly.
Lisa.
One of the small notes in here says aerial access to be provided upon completion of building 12. What kind of aerial access? And
That's for a ladder truck, aerial access for fire trucks, so they can get in there, park, lift their boom,
yeah,
get people off the roof, spray water on a roof. All of
Interesting.
those types of things, which
Okay.
is a real concern from the state fire marshal.
Great. Thanks for clarifying that.
Kevin.
Did I read correctly that the estimated cost is 6 million?
Yes, you did read that.
So that's the demo, the regrading, paving. Okay.
Yes, it's that there is some structural seismic stabilization going on to the remaining building, as well as fixing some parts that when we tear off the adjacent building.
Mhm.
So
Excellent. Steve.
And follow up to that, I've forgotten, can you remind me how much unallocated funds we have remaining on the bond?
And that's the piece where we're working on internally to bring back the whole reprioritization and go through all the projects. So I'm going through with the staff, and we are internally as a cabinet team going through all of those, and we'll bring those projects back. I'm hoping by August. So we'll have summer. Having this particular project going and voted in July will give us enough to get through to summer, and then we'll bring those back. But those are all things, because it also depends on how much interest we have, and then we have to pay taxes on the interest. And so we're collecting all that information still.
Just to follow up then, my sense is that I'm certainly gonna support this. It seems like a high priority. It seems like a thing we can't afford not to do. So that's my sense. And at the same time, there's some value to seeing this in context, like, well, how much money would we have left over for other priorities? So to the extent that we can see that in context when we vote, as opposed to vote in July, lock this up and then only afterwards find out what's remaining. There's, at least to me, some value in seeing those things together.
That's it. I understand where you're going with that. The only caveat I would put in there is this is the lowest cost to take care of the safety risk of the building and still provide all the emergency vehicle access that the fire department and all of those want us to have. I really pushed all this group of, is there a better way? Is there a way we can use less on this? Because they do have to stabilize the roof in the 1966 portions because of that central utilities. There was no other lower cost option that we found to not to have to do this.
Yeah. Why aren't we putting like heating coils on the roof to just prevent 4 inches from snow from accumulating?
part of the protocol is to turn up the heat in the building
Yeah.
because it's not well insulated, but we evacuate the building, turn up the heat, probably not the most sustainable approach over a long time. And it takes time, you know. And then there's also water that can build up in that type of a situation, which if it doesn't drain properly. So no easy answers.
Just clarifying, in July, obtain board support. Can you go over once again what we're asking for in the July meeting?
In the July meeting, we'll ask the board to approve the 6.6 million allocation out of the bond funds for this particular, to get this particular project going.
All right, understood. All right, any further questions? All right, seeing none, we'll move on. Next to the Black Pioneer Monument recognition. Attached is two draft documents. One is a draft letter of support and the other is a draft resolution. I want to emphasize the word draft in this. Obviously, the therefore and the resolution is the key aspect of this. Note that there's no funding attached in the resolution here. I would be kind of curious though, in regards to the board, what they would like to see if there's any funding they would like to attach to it. But there was also conversations around other ways that we can support the Black Pioneer Monument. And I think that this resolution allows for further conversations to occur with that. Additionally, there was some concerns from community leaders. Kevin, thank you for forwarding some communications and individuals to me for further discussion. And I did receive an email from the Black Cultural Initiative, and that email is attached as a document there as well in regards to a variety of different concerns that were brought up. So essentially, if the board supports the draft letter and the draft resolution, we'll put that in the next agenda to vote on. But I want to bring further discussion to the board. Any further questions, discussion?
I thought both documents were fine. I would support them. I think the Black Cultural Initiative folks have addressed, many, if not all, of the concerns that were brought up. There seems to be, sufficient due diligence around this project. The question remaining is funding.
Exactly. Zach?
What are you thinking for the timeline to have that conversation around potential financial or other support for the project?
I mean, I was hoping that we would have a discussion here with that. But they were not given, they didn't, I asked them if there's a timeline that we need to worry about, and they didn't indicate any specific timeline around things. They said that the letter of support was very important to them. And the resolution of communicating support was really important to them. But if further discussion needs to be done about funding, they were open to whatever timeline we want to work with.
What was did they make a funding request?
Yeah, so the funding request was $25,000, which was the, I apologize, I forgot the title of it, but it was their, there was like tiers of support essentially.
Diamond.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, diamond. Yeah, exactly. I think it was like diamond support.
Do you have the multiple levels? Do we know what the different levels of support?
I did not get that from them. No, just that I guess the county is doing 25,000 plus additional 10,000, I believe, and the city is also providing 25,000. So, yeah.
Well, I would be supportive of financial contribution. I'd sort of like to know what the different levels are, so that we can kind of have a conversation around that. But I'm very supportive of making some level of contribution.
Gotcha. Okay.
I'd like to explore the idea of opening up to the LCC community the opportunity to participate financially in this donation. I don't know exactly what that would look like, but to me, that feels better than just the board saying, yes, we agreed to X number of dollars and, a check being cut. I think it's more meaningful if the community has a chance to participate in that.
Absolutely. And I think the language and the spirit of this resolution does that for sure.
Agreed.
One of the things that was discussed by Dr. Balger, Lisa, and I was that potentially the board out of its budget can contribute to this as well. So that was one of the items that was discussed as far as a financial contribution. Based off of what we've budgeted for the board, I think we could do up to $10,000 out of the board's budget. And then we can continue to have conversations where other areas of opportunity is. Lisa, was there anything else that we should bring up in that discussion?
No, I just wanted to say that I would like to see, I really appreciate the letter and the resolution, and I would like to see that moved forward, even if there is a longer conversation about the funding, because I think the thing that they're most interested in at this time is our support as an educational institution. I also wanted to mention that I was having a really interesting conversation at a community event last evening, and someone shared with me that there has actually been work done by the city of Eugene in terms of when they were planning for the new riverfront neighborhood, and putting in, it was work that was done with eWeb in terms of thinking about the infrastructure there, and that there is work that the city has done for planning for a cultural landscape, particularly, if you think about that neighborhood, many of the new street names are indigenous names, Kalapuya language, or recognize Black pioneers or certain people and Black people in the community's history. So I think it's important to recognize that this is part of a larger constellation of work that the city is doing. And it's something that will continue. And that this piece, this monument, fits well into that cultural landscape. So I'd like to see us support it and even think about how we build the connection of the college to supporting that cultural landscape. So I want us to move ahead with the letter and move ahead with the resolution and continue the conversation. I'm intrigued by what Kevin suggested and how that might work. Maybe like Austin mentioned, the board can make a contribution and see if the community would match it. And so that way we could, decrease maybe the amount that we contribute, and if the community matched it as well, and try to bring some awareness to the process.
Absolutely. Denise and then Steve. Denise?
Thank you. I fully agree, and I support the resolution and our contribution to it. I think that the matching fund idea is with the community is very good. It's a very good opportunity to link educationally and just extended community. So if we can build that foundation, then as Lisa's pointing out, that this is, which I didn't know, a larger concept that's going on, it will keep the doors of communication open to our participation and the educational aspects of it. So I'm in full agreement with that, and I look forward to the board's commitment in that way.
Excellent. Steve?
Yep, but just wanted to say, really following Lisa's footsteps, that I also am in support of the letter and motion as written, and hearing that that's what they're most eager for in the short term, and are willing to wait as we think through how we might contribute some beyond, a support letter and resolution. So in any case, I think it makes sense to support, to queue that up for July, and then continue discussion. To just throw out one other idea that we might debate and discuss at a future meeting in terms of financial contribution. I guess I'd like to see us at least think about ways that we might, how do I want to say that? make some financial contribution that, recognizes our value add to the community, which is education, right? So we might, create, for example, some kind of a scholarship for Black or minority students, right? That endures long past just a year or two in recognition of this significant community initiative. So there are ways to make direct contributions to the funding of the monument itself, and maybe that's appropriate. And then there's other ways that we might say, well, we're an educational institution, and this is another way that we might kind of support the general emphasis behind and intent behind this initiative. So just seems to me like there's probably a bunch of ways that we might consider. I'm not suggesting I know what the best way is, but I like the idea of opening up a conversation and really thinking through what might be the best way for us to participate.
Excellent. So overall, I'm hearing support for the letter and the draft resolution. And I assume we could just throw it in the consent agenda for the next board meeting?
Yes.
All right, perfect, great. Excellent. Moving on, we're going to move on to enrollment and retention report. Dr. Bulger?
We are pleased to bring an end of the year enrollment and retention report. You may recall we've been giving you reports throughout the year. What Dr. Joyce is going to do is give you a summary report. So Dr. Joyce.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bulger and Board of Education. I also added something to the fall to fall retention enrollment report, and that's an update about some of the ACT-CROW initiatives. And I want to start off with also thanking Kathy back here from IR and also Dawn for helping me put this together. So if we could look at the first slide, please. We still hadn't got the data in for 24 yet, so we'll be giving you one of them in September about the new data. But if you look at fall of 2022, we started with, this is full-time, sorry, not full-time, it's full-time and part-time fall start degree seeking students. And so if you look at fall of 2022, we had 1,839 students. We saw a good improvement in fall of 2023 with just shy of 2,000. And we also seen that uptick as well in fall of 24. The next slide is interesting because it's interesting in there's not much difference. The demographic factors of our students for those 2 years, almost identical in all of those areas, whether it's gender, whether it's the age groups, which demographic, Latinx, BIPOC, white, and also Pell recipients. It's pretty much straight across the board. And so there's no real statistical differences between those groups. Next slide, please. This one's is interesting in that it shows a big shift during fall of 22 and fall of 23. Full-time, first-time students, there was a 4% drop in those that were full-time. So you might also say there was a 4% increase in part-time students. But there was a drop there, and we know from our own research here and research across community colleges or four-year universities that full-time students are more likely to succeed and persist and graduate. So this is something we need to look at. Whether it's in advising, early outreach, as we bring students on board and encourage that. The program is the study is CTE. This is a huge shift that it changed 10% to being actually the major program of study in fall of 2023. And so that was a surprise, and you can see the transfer students shifted in the other direction. If you're out in the community here, you do meet a lot of people who really have a lot of good things to say about Lane Community College and the trades, and about it's a place a lot of people know or been to, and they've been able to get a career out of it. And so I think we're well known for that in the area. And I'm not sure why that shift was so big in 1 year, though. That's pretty big. Yeah. And again, we'll have updated information on fall of 2024 soon enough. Next slide, please.
Oh, just really quick
Yep,
before you
yep,
move. Do we know the impact of STEP within these enrollments? I assume that also probably has a play with CTE because it is more like a CTE type of coursework that they're going after with STEP.
Yes, and I work with Care and Career Pathways more than I did when I first got here. As I've learned more about what they're doing, and they have increased what they're doing with STEP. They're getting more funding, and so that might be a part of this as well. So I think you're correct in that. Yeah. All right. So this one, the left-hand column will show you the retention of the fall start cohort. And this is fall to winter. So in fall of 2022, just shy of 75% of students were retained from fall to winter. And in 2023, it was 76% were retained from fall to winter. So there was a slight increase there, just over 1.5%, which is, it means something when you look at the number of students or the credits they're taking as well. In fall of 2022, there was a 63% retention from fall to spring in fall of 2022. And in fall of 2023, it increased again about another 1.5 in percentages. There's a number of reasons we might have improved it. We've been doing work in our enrollment work group. Jennifer Fry, Kathy Bliss, and others have been working with faculty, and I'll talk a bit more about that in the ACRA to work directly with faculty to kind of give them heads up that they can talk to students about different, have you registered for the next term? Do you know that this is the deadline? And they're getting important information kind of delivered to them that they speak to the students about. And I think that's one of the reasons we've seen that increase in retention, just one real kind of initiative that's made a difference. If we can go up next slide, please. All right, so I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the ACRA recommendations. If you remember, I think there were 41 recommendations in total about what we could do across the college to improve new enrollments, retention, persistence, and even improving, I think, the working environment. This one was one of those varied, accessible academic schedule based on student need and desires. And one of the things, if you in the last board meetings we've talked about 1 year registration. We started off with two-term registration, and we're moving to 1 year registration. I know Zach's brought this up before as well. And based upon what we've been doing and developing within EAB Navigate, we're utilizing more and more of this product and working with EAB to get the best out of it. And in this, students are able to register directly within EAB, and also with what the advisors and academic departments have been working on the academic plans. They can really plan ahead better now than they have been able to before. So they're able to choose their schedule around their course schedule around their own needs and lifestyle. And work, childcare, those kind of things. So this also allows us to track what student patterns are as well, and get a better idea of also working with the academic affairs side of the house, what courses are filling, what it looks like we might need to offer next term or the 2 terms after, so that we can better work with getting faculty to teach classes, offer more versions of it. Maybe we need online versus face-to-face, those kind of things. And so it gives students better predictability so that they can really have a better long-term academic experience and plan out the degree. And also, when you're doing that, you realize, oh, if I only take 2 courses a term, it's going to take that much longer for me to finish versus if I take 3 a term or take classes in summer. So that's one of the updates that's made a difference, or will make a big difference. Next slide, please. I'm going to get me water. Hold on. The other one, I don't use those. Not being in Oregon too long. So implement the evaluation of incoming transcripts as they arrive and explore a new onboarding and student success program. That's pretty wordy. EAB, they were here to give us presentations last year during fall end service. And one of them they gave was on a student success coach model at Pueblo Community College. And this model looks like it could be a difference maker for the onboarding of new students and the retention of new students if we're to apply it. So it's one of the things we're looking at. We're going to bring a team to work with Pueblo and learn as much as we can about the model face to face. They give us presentations, they've talked about it, but I'm a big believer in see how things work on the ground, talk to all the people who are involved in it and see what we could bring back here and what we could learn from them and what won't work, you know, those kind of things. So part of that would be evaluating transcripts as they come in right on the get-go and basically doing an articulation of what courses transfer in, what doesn't, what it would do to go to their degree, and including career and all those things in it too. This would really improve, I would say, the student experience right from the get-go. They'd know what courses to register for almost immediately. The success coaches would be able to advise them on first-term registration, help them work on degree plans, and really connect them with the resources of the college. Also, we've been looking at Parchment. Dawn was working with Parchment, and they're the ones who help us with our transcripts here and many other colleges and universities. And they're developing a tool that might help us with evaluations of incoming transcripts that would also save a lot of work for our staff members as well. And so these kind of additional supports would make a big difference. It's kind of more holistic way of approaching it. It's technology, but it's also high touch. And that's one of the areas we're looking at pretty well. And we're doing a lot of legwork on it now. Next slide, please. One was to encourage faculty to provide timely, consistent feedback and timely grading. Early outreach efforts are really improving and encouraging faculty to reach out to student success coaches when students are identified as needing support or maybe experiencing academic challenges. The platform was recently updated, and we're talking about EAB Navigate, so a faculty member can put a concern right into it, and then they could be followed up quickly with. And so I think a more formalized grading process would definitely also help increase the effectiveness of this program. Another one was identify at least one additional requirement for each application type to reduce fraudulent applications. This has been we implement on Thursday. It's thanks to the Board of Education in a recent session we had. Approving the application deposit that goes into place on Thursday, tomorrow, that's tomorrow, day after tomorrow, and that'll make a difference. I want to say that this term, it takes a bit of work to process using our systems to be able to implement something like that. We got to work with the bursar's office and multiple other, we got to make sure our systems, we had to work with international programs, nursing, because deposits are made in certain programs and our system wasn't set up to do this exactly the way we want it to do. So we've had to work with different departments to make this work. But this term, we've seen, again, a significant increase over last term. And this is for summer. We were seeing math, writing type classes, even dental assisting with full immediately with wait lists. And when we looked at we had financial aid and IT people and others looking at these applications and the data one by one, and we found that there were L numbers, basically the student ID number, some of them from many, many years ago, and lots of them from that time period, often use the same IP address and all done on the same day, all these kind of things that we've seen and they were blocking students getting in classes who needed those classes. So we had to do a drop of these students, a number of these students, And financial aid has also put a hold on registration as, and we're contacting each one individually to make sure that no other real students, authentic students got caught in the process. So that is a difference maker. It will take so much, allow us to spend so much time on real students rather than these ones that are fishing for free financial aid. All right, next, I think, are we getting close? Include various stakeholders in a walkthrough of all application types to identify, this was the 39 steps currently needed to get registered. And that was more than just register. It was a lot of other parts of the process, the 39 steps. This has been under review a lot. Recruitment and Admission Steering Committee has been prioritizing this, and they've made a number of improvements this year in messaging to students, more frequent communications, and an overview of the emails we're sending out. We've been merging emails to send less to them, communicate more effectively. And also we're working on streamlining the whole enrollment experience. We found that the online orientation for a lot of students is a lot of students, it's not mandatory, but a lot of them are taking it anyway and really going through it. And I think that's improving some of this. We only launched this after ACRA were here last year. So spelling out the process has been a real improvement for them. And we're also working to get into the texting game and working with our students as well. We use text for certain things, but we want to use them more effectively, especially with the new generations of students. Text is a difference maker. But we're really trying to simplify and improve the process for onboarding in a big way. And also technology and the student success coach model can really make a difference and be high touch. And then without all those fraudulent applications, we can actually do our jobs. And so next slide. We've done a lot of things. Sorry. This was quicker when I went through it myself. Centralized communications, marketing strategy, and development. The enrollment work group has created a collaborative method to communicate with students in a coordinated and intentional way. They've identified themes for the week, each week in the term, and delivering students what they need to know at that exact time. It's not just shared with students, but as we talked, it's shared with faculty across the campus, and faculty are talking about in the classroom. So we're seeing more students register for classes early or before it gets too late, before classes close up. Say, for instance, a faculty member teaching the first in a sequence of a course might say, I only seen 2/3 of you assigned up for next term. There's only so many spots left, and I'm teaching it again. So those kind of things are happening now. The centralized calendar we're using is helping identify events across marketing, recruitment, and enrollment teams, and using these plans to help reach students in a coordinated method. We do send a lot of emails across campus to students, and I think we've been working together a lot more in looking at what we send and trying to get a hold on it. And again, it's helping reduce duplication and messaging and increased internal communication between departments, between Brett's department, all of our student affairs departments. We've been working a lot together on this kind of thing. All right. Next. Thanks. Questions?
Excellent. Any questions?
And I've got Dawn help me too, and Kathy and I are.
Steve.
Thanks for the presentation. So a couple things you said caught my attention. Just wanted to follow up on and give you at least a sense of what my, as one board members, places I'm zeroing in on, in no particular order, that 39 clicks to registration.
Yeah.
That had caught my attention right from day one when we got the first report, right? So we're open to all students. Anybody can become a Lane student regardless of prior, educational preparation. That's fantastic. 39 clicks is a huge barrier at the end of the day, right? We all know that. I don't think anybody disagrees.
Yeah.
So for me anyways, that's a place where, I'm hoping, a year from now, when you come back and do another update, that you can show us, some kind of a, even if it's not an improvement from 39 to something else, a map that shows us, here's the 39 that we did have, and here's how we think we're going to get it to, I'm making up a number, 25 or what, but that's a specific thing that I think would get that,
show real progress.
That would show some real progress. I was really curious about the the other thing that you said about how you can, share with faculty, the number of students who have signed up for a course that they need to take in the following term in order to stay on track, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
How do we know that faculty are using the information that you're sharing with them? That example you gave.
I'll let Kathy O'Donnell maybe speak to that. Kathy? She's been huge in this project, so.
So every Monday morning, faculty receives their course number and how many students over every week that we have registration open, what their percents are. So we can see them increase. And especially the ones that initially are high, that signifies, it isn't a guarantee that they're actually talking to their students, but we've worked with multiple faculty and communicating with them and finding out, do they like this and do they like receiving this sort of tips of the week about what to talk to your students about? And they do. It helps them. It also makes them feel like there's less siloed across the institution, that they know what's going on in student affairs, that there is tutoring available, that advising is there. So that there's Reg Fests, that's a big one. And I, with the group, create flyers and posters that faculty can put up on Moodle shelves. So it's readily, easily available for them. So.
Thank you.
Last quick thing is at the very beginning, you showed some demographic information. The interesting thing to me was at least short-term shift from a primarily, transfer institution to a primarily CTE institution. We'll see what the trend looks like over the longer term. The other thing that would be interesting to track for us, I think, is whether how we are shifting from, in-person to online. At what point do we cross a similar threshold with regard to those two camps?
Right now, when it comes to in-person or online, we are about 30% of our students are entirely online. And about 50% of courses taken at LCC are online versus face-to-face 50%. So it's about right in the middle.
Yeah, and it just
overall.
seems like there has been a significant shift since the pandemic
Yes.
moving in that direction.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what we've got to think about is we've got to look at maybe retention of online students versus face-to-face, and there's hybrid and things like that. I'll give a report quite a while back about that, but we should give updated information like that and success rates. And also I think how we can also shift some of our services to support maybe a growing online population, and how do we keep them engaged with the college? What about alumni? All of those things we've got to ask questions about.
Excellent. Kevin?
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Getting back to the issue of fraudulent applications. Does LCC have cybersecurity courses offered? And
yes.
Okay, if so, could we unleash the power of students in some way to at least, in a confidential way? We can't.
We can probably look at involving that group. I imagine this would be a great project. We'd have to think about FERPA and those kind of things too, but they may be able to.
I see head shaking back there.
You don't want to do this? Right, IT people, come on, Brett. I used to think of more work. Come on, you got to work closely with student affairs.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. HIPAA.
Perfect. Got it.
All right. All right. But I do think we are looking at not just this, having an application deposit won't keep them off forever. What we're going to see is COCC has it. Now we're doing it. I like to be very transparent with our community college partners throughout the state. So I let them know we're doing it. And a couple of them were asking how we're doing it and those kind of things. It won't surprise me if it's successful for us. Others will jump on the bandwagon. Maybe a year from now, there might be 5 or 6 more of them doing it. What we'll see as we continue to do this across the board, these bad actors figure out different ways of getting around anything. And so we're looking at other options. We'd like to do something like an ID verify at the front end. But my concern is I've worked a lot with DREAMA and DACA students in the past, and this is just creating a huge barrier for them. So we've got to figure out ways of doing this using our IT people. But the resources we've got are a struggle to be able to do everything we're doing.
I can't imagine.
Yeah.
The other thought was, could AI assist in, identifying or sorting or such of these fraudulent applications?
Well, I'm going to ask. Where there you are. I think he likes working with us. He was just on one of our student affairs search committees. So yeah, yeah. So we'll make it. We're going to continue to be more innovative. We're not just going to relax on the deposit because we know that's got a shelf life that it's going to work for.
Excellent. Zach?
Yeah. With regards to retention of students, when a student's not doing well in a class, what is the process to flag that student for an intervention for additional help? And is that consistent across all classes? Or is that, by each teacher sort of does what they want to do in terms of flagging a student?
All right. I'm going to ask Dawn if you wouldn't mind speaking to that. I could give you a fair answer, but she'll give you a better one.
It's a good question. Thank you. So right now our early outreach program is sort of responsible for taking in those requests from faculty if students are not achieving the success that we would want them to. We continue to kind of get the word out about the use of Navigate, which is really our preferred system to report those. We spend a lot of time kind of doing our roadshows. We do things inviting ourselves to department meetings and having kind of little presentations about the use of Navigate. And so right now it's a little bit more of an opt-in, but we're really trying to bother people with our friendship and with our Navigate system in order to get them to utilize it and in order to report those student interactions. Once they get to early outreach, then that team of folks provides resources for people. So whether that's tutoring or other resources, potentially a reference to CARE or STEP or career pathways or any of the other resources that we have on campus.
But right now there's not a requirement that at say a quarter or halfway or at certain points in the term that the teacher would have to report these are the students that are currently not on path to finish the course.
You're right that there's not a requirement.
Okay.
Yep.
I just want to float that there might be a real value in actually just saying, at a third of the way through the term, halfway and 2/3 of the way through, we're going to have
I love that.
a requirement that you need to flag for us, anyone that we need to intervene with so that we don't have folks falling through the cracks.
That's really great. Thank you.
All right, Denise, and we're going a little bit over time here. So yeah, Denise.
Well, following up a little bit on Zach's point, it can also be that students are aware, that students advocate for themselves and say, where that they ask and specifically know, because everybody has different grading timelines and systems and everything. But if students become more empowered to say, I want to know my standing in this class and everything, or if they have concerns because a midterm or particular project or whatever is coming up, that they themselves go and know the resources of tutoring and other resources that are available. I have found over the years that an example would be office hours. Students are not necessarily used to taking that responsibility of going in to the professors and saying, asking, in what particular ways can this be improved, and empowering themselves to manage their education that way and not waiting for somebody else to do it. So I hope that there's ways in which students are also aware of taking the lead and getting the resources that are so available to them.
Yeah, I think that's important. Students to self-advocate and ask their faculty for feedback, for timely grading, and the earlier in the term that they get feedback to know how they're doing, the more chance they have of getting those resources like tutoring if we're slipping, if we need more help. Of getting help with faculty. And I think also when you talked about faculty meeting times with students, that online should also be an option, as we're seeing an increase in the online students, or if we got distance students out, maybe at a place like Florence, that would be ideal as well. So thank you.
All right. We'll move on to the next topic. We'll try to make it. So thank you once again for that presentation. Really appreciate that. I'll try to make up some time here with this next couple topics here. Oh, for those at home, you might want to refresh board docs. E and F kind of switched. So we're going to cover the vacancy selection process. So attached is the board operating procedures in regards to vacancy. Page 5 is where you find the language around that. So our deadline is July 8th. We've sent out advertisements for social media, KLCC, and obviously a press release. We do have one applicant that actually just recently turned in an application, Julie Wiseman. And I just wanted to kind of just discuss the timeline remember from our last discussion, we were wanting to hopefully appoint someone before the retreat. One of the dates that we threw out there was July 10th. July 10th because it's a round number. I'm just kidding. July 10th because it's a week after I'm glad you got that joke. Anyway, the July 10th is because a week after our July 3rd meeting, and we were thinking we could schedule that for interviews. And I wanted to ask the board if a July 10th interview time period would work for them. All right, Steve.
I think I already wrote to you, but maybe it was just to Stephanie and others that I'm going to be out of town that entire week, the 8th to the 12th, and I'm on a river trip. And so there's no way for me to phone in from a distance.
Understood. And with that, I wanted to kind of discuss that timeline then, that if this is still a reasonable timeline to try to get someone in before the board retreat, or should we extend this out? Please note that August, obviously, we take off usually during that time period and so forth. So I wanted to open up this discussion to kind of talk a little bit more about the timeline, get some more guidance around that.
So just can you refresh us? So the application closes on the 8th.
The 8th, yes, correct.
And you were thinking we would meet on the 10th?
Correct.
And our meeting is on the 17th. Do we have a board meeting on the?
We have the board retreat on the 20th.
Okay, so we don't have a meeting on the 17th.
Correct.
So if we were to interview people on the 10th, when would we actually vote on selecting a person?
We would do a special session. And that was the other reason for why July 10th was, well, actually, wait, actually, we did not discuss that. Actually, no, we did not discuss how we would do that, but it would do a special session. Lisa.
On the 17th, presumably.
I would say
discuss potentially, we can do a special session at the beginning of the retreat.
Yeah.
A special session is when you gavel in, gavel out.
Right, but I feel like the person will need some notice before the retreat that they've been selected.
Precisely.
So we would actually need to make the decision prior to the retreat if we wanted the
Yes,
person
absolutely.
there.
Yeah, but to swear them in, we could do it a special session.
Right, but the vote, would
you're
the vote happen the same night as the interviews or on a different night?
Well, the interviews have to be a public meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it could potentially happen that evening. Depends on how many people there are.
Do folks have thoughts on if we can vote the same night as the interviews? Or if we need a week between?
I would be perfectly okay with voting on that same night. But yeah, Kevin, go ahead.
I mean, I'd like to have Steve there.
I agree.
Because
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, I'm in full agreement with that. And that's why I want to talk about the timeline. Like, should we go ahead and extend this out then? So that we can make sure that all board members are included. But again, keep in mind that would push it out I mean, unless you guys want to meet in August, but I heavily doubt that.
I wonder, could we schedule a Monday, the 15th for interviews and a Wednesday, the 17th for a vote? For a quick, very quick vote on the 7th, 2 days later.
When are you back, Steve?
I have to double check, but I think it's Saturday, the 13th. We'll be driving back, so be back at the end of that day.
And I am flying back from Colorado on the 15th.
Mhm.
I could check to see when we arrive back.
There's also the issue that, we select somebody on whatever it is that week, and then they get invited to an 8-hour thing on Saturday and they
Yeah.
say, well, geez,
Exactly. Another reason why we were pushing for the 10th, because it would give them enough time to, figure things out and so forth. So, yeah. Kevin?
So, if I remember our discussion, it was something like, gee, it'd be really great if we could do this and have the person attend the retreat. That would be best
Yeah.
situation. But maybe if we extend the process of the timeline, then obviously the person wouldn't attend the retreat.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be ideal, wouldn't be the worst thing in the world in my mind.
Mhm.
But it would bump it into September, would bump it into the fall.
Correct. Yeah. Do note that I think that we have a really good onboarding process, though, and I think that would be perfectly sufficient. Obviously, it doesn't replace the kind of bonding capacity that it happens in the retreat, but yeah, I agree with you. It was an ideal situation. So, Lisa.
So we do typically have a work session. We would have typically had a work session on the 17th. We could potentially use that to start the process, do interviews. One thing, if you review the board operating procedures, which we have affirmed as a board. In the past, we have always interviewed every applicant, kind of as an acknowledgement, a sign of respect in some ways, but also it creates a very transparent process and discussion. So if we have a smaller group of applicants, we can easily do the majority of them in one evening. If we have, like when I was appointed to the board, 15, it requires a more extensive process, right? So I think the number of applicants will determine some of that, but I could see at least, I'd be curious to know what people think about at least getting started on the 17th.
I'm open to it.
I'm just going to take a quick look at my calendar.
All right. Take a minute to look at calendars here.
Yeah, I'd be open to that.
All right.
Oh, my calendar shows us having a meeting.
I know, mine does also, so.
Not every, the first and the third. So I'm available that night.
Excellent. Denise, does the 17th work for you? All right. Excellent. Zach?
So we can, when this has happened in the past, generally have they voted on the same night as the interviews or just at the next meeting? I'm thinking we could vote maybe even at the retreat as one of our actions at the retreat if we're ready then, or.
We'll go ahead, at least.
So in the past, there have been large numbers of applicants for appointment processes. And so we've done an initial set of interviews, very short to narrow it down. And then we've done second set of interviews in which we identified like our top 3 or 4. And then we did a second set of longer interviews with those top candidates. And in that meeting, we did decide and vote who the choice would be. So yes, we can do that in the same meeting if we choose to, and we have in the past.
Kevin?
Yeah, listening to the discussion, the number of applicants is really going to drive the process. So I think we would be remiss if we artificially set a deadline that would not allow us to spend sufficient time due diligence and interviewing. So I am leaning towards starting the process on the 17th with the idea that it could spill into September.
Okay, gotcha. So you like the save the date concept? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, just hearing what Lisa said, I think it at this point, it's open-ended. We can talk about a start date. We can't quite talk about a finish date until we are more clear about, what we have in front of us.
Absolutely.
I will point out there is another Wednesday in July, the 24th.
That is my mother's birthday.
Tell your mom she can come. She loves our meetings. I know.
I know she loves these meetings. But yeah,
Joking.
Yeah, I know.
So it sounds like first round of interviews on the 17th, and we will have to play it by ear with regards to a potential second round of interviews if we need a second round. And,
Absolutely.
when we can vote after a first and or second round of interviews will be decided later.
Absolutely. And by July 3rd, we'll also have a better understanding of like, okay, do we have, 2 applicants or 15 applicants?
By July 8th.
Yep. By July 3rd, and then the deadline's July 8th. So yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we'll have a better idea for that then too. Okay, cool. So we'll just do a save the date, and the number of applicants kind of drive the conversation from there.
So we did just commit to a meeting on the 17th.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. A save the date for that. And go ahead, Zach.
Who's drafting the interview questions?
Well,
Go ahead.
we had quite a robust set of interview questions. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to locate those. But I think I may, did you
Brett,
find them?
Brett.
Oh,
no, I had a question.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
okay.
We're offering to write questions. That's what I thought. That's where I thought.
I thought you found them. So yeah.
I'll dig for them.
Yes. Okay. Cool.
I think I may have located my set.
Okay.
So I have to double check that they're the questions for this board and not a different board, but I did find some files. But yeah, we will need to generate questions.
Absolutely.
Do you have a question, Brett? Yeah, my question is pertaining to public notice for the meeting. I would expect significantly fewer applicants for this position because it's not an at-large position. But would you like there to be the notice of a possible regular meeting where you'll take action? Do you want, and I can take direction from the chair and vice chair, but
I think that's appropriate. So yeah.
that way, if you want to move forward, we've provided that notice.
Exactly. Okay. Yep.
So going back to the questions, I'm curious, is there anybody here who likes working on that type of thing?
Their name is AI.
I mean, I'm willing to help, but if there was maybe 1 or 2 other people that would want to work with me, especially if anybody has participated in this particular process prior, that would be much appreciated.
Yeah. I mean, I participated in the bond oversight committee selection process where we had interview questions, so I can help with that. So
are we allowed to have 3
You
or
can
just
have
2?
3.
yeah, we can have 3.
Is there a volunteer?
Oh, no, 3 board members.
To
Yeah.
draft the questions?
Subcommittee members.
Exactly.
Does anyone want to volunteer to work with Austin and I on a set of questions for the interviews?
I can help with that.
Mhm.
Unless, do you either of you want to do it?
No, I trust your judgment on this.
Okay.
I mean, the questions should be not quite generic, but almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would suggest, and maybe, I guess we don't have legal counsel here, but that we share the questions and get feedback.
Yeah.
And I think that would be appropriate as a process for us to share the questions and get feedback. I think we've done that in the past. I don't think that's like a meetings rule violation. We're not deliberating on anything.
We could have Celia send it out and then receive the feedback.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And we can, we can make a goal of getting that to the board before the 3rd, so that if there are tweaks that need to be made to the questions, that there would be time for.
That'd be great.
Other board
Opportunity on
members
the 3rd to
comment
about
on
those a
those
little bit.
questions, and
Great,
change the
perfect.
questions. during that.
Although,
I don't know. if
is
I
there any
can get
value in, do we want those questions to be revealed to candidates at the moment of, or they can have access to those questions by watching the meeting?
Yeah, that's a good question. In the past, we've provided them 24 hours before or like the morning before, based on the idea of, generosity to
Yeah.
different styles.
So,
Yeah.
I think some, like,
Yeah.
advance notice makes a lot of sense, but 2 weeks sounds like
Yeah.
kind of a lot. So,
Yeah.
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 If we finish, well, if we talk about them on the 3rd, the
Then it would be
deadline.
public.
Right.
It would be public then is what.
Yeah, it'd be a public document, which
I,
then, yeah.
I frankly don't care if they're public. If they have time to prepare ahead of time and they want to prepare their statements, more power to them if they want to take the time and energy to prepare their, to think about how they want to respond to the questions.
Okay.
And frankly, I think that when the application deadline closes, we could just say, here's the questions. We'll see you in a week for your interviews. I don't have a problem with them seeing it ahead of time. If that's I mean, would you rather get a chance to see the questions yourself and tweak them? Or do you care more about it being a surprise to the public? And do we need to talk about, I mean, I suppose you could just respond in an email to, this is what I think of your questions. So we don't need to do it.
Lisa?
If if board members are comfortable with providing feedback to the questions and, the committee finalizes the questions, I think I would prefer to send them out 48 hours in advance, not have them be public not have them be public 2 weeks. That's just my preference. I appreciate, having people respond to the questions in a more, I don't know, a way that hasn't been a study session for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That's just me personally.
Understood.
That's roughly where I'm at, that, some amount of time makes sense. Too much doesn't feel right either. So I don't know exactly what it is, 24 or 48 hours.
But
But
I
more
just
than that,
recognize that some people have busy work schedules. And if I received a question on a Monday and you have to respond by Wednesday, I would have a lot more time to think about it if I got it on a Friday and could think about it over the weekend. And I'm just wanting to, be fair to people that might work, 9 to 5 jobs on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and aren't going to have time to do a bunch of research, whereas other people might have time to do that, say, to commit that additional energy. I defer to others. I don't have a strong opinion.
Yeah. Having been because of the agency I work for, I work with a lot of employers and what they want to see with their interview processes and stuff like that. I would say that the 48 hours is pretty standard, or 24 hours is pretty standard and so forth. And many of those applicants are also working too, as well. They might be working in our job interviewing for a different job type of situation. So yeah, but I definitely understand where you're coming from there, Zach. I do prefer the feedback method where it's sent out. We send out a list of questions and the board responds with feedback and so forth. We can and as a committee look at that feedback and consider those edits. And I'm open to even July 9th. We have the applicants. We interview every applicant, so we can send out the questions to them on July 9th even. So I'm open to that idea as well. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you and Lisa and I need to get together, draft the questions, send them to the board. The board can respond through email. We'll meet a second time to finalize the questions. And then we can share the final questions with the board. And then it sounds like people have a preference for sending it out 48 hours ahead instead of a week ahead. So if that's the case, then that sounds like the game plan. And I look forward to working with you all in the background to get those questions accomplished in the next 2 weeks.
Excellent. I'm failing at the amount of time we're spending on these topics. So I think we have a path forward there. Got some direction from the board. We meet on the 26th to also discuss agenda items too. So we have a committee for the questions. All right. Moving on to the board member appointments and community organizations. You have the list of the different community organizations. And just a reminder, obviously LCOG is open with Mike Eister's vacancy. The LEC is vacant. The Oregon Community College Association will become vacant come July 1st. And so those are, and I'd love for the remaining members to describe whether they want to continue or not. But I just wanted to gauge interest for the different ones. Let's start with LCOG. Zach?
I'm interested in taking on Mike's LCOG responsibilities.
Okay, excellent.
Same.
Okay, so we got 2 individuals interested in the LCOG. And really quick, do you guys have second choices at all or?
No.
Okay, gotcha. And how this works is it's a nomination. I believe it's nomination and a vote, I believe. Or, oh, Lisa, go ahead.
I actually think our policies say somewhere, or maybe it's a board operating procedure, that it's actually the chair that appoints these committee positions. I mean, it's never been that the chair just does it. We've always discussed it.
Yeah.
And figured it out, but we can certainly, I don't think it's a problem if we vote on it in a board meeting.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be clear, Mike served on both LCOG and on the Lane Economic Committee, which is also part of LCOG.
Yeah.
And I believe he said the Lane Economic Committee didn't meet that frequently, but it looks like it's actually held the second Monday of each month. So I don't know, those are both open. And I thought maybe there could be, some resolution there that by the fact that there's two.
Okay. Yeah. Anyone interested in the LEC by chance?
Well, I mean, I'd be, and I think it makes sense for one person to represent the two LCOG positions. And so, I'd potentially also be willing to go to the OCCA. I don't know if I have capacity to do both, but I am interested in both, but definitely. Anyways, I would be happy to represent us at LCOG, but I would, be happy to have others there as well.
Okay, gotcha. All right, understood.
And, just to be clear, I've done a year for being the liaison with KLCC, and I would happily give someone another opportunity to do that.
Okay. Thank you for letting us know that. Really quick. And you mentioned that you were interested in LEC, or you were interested in essentially both LCOG positions, essentially, correct?
I mean, I think it would make sense to have one person that does the two LCOG things. Is anyone else willing to serve on the OCCA now that Austin is the chair of OCCA and we get a second seat there?
Yeah. Anyone else interested in OCCA?
It's a capacity issue. I'm interested in it, but I don't want to overcommit.
Understood. Excellent. My only interest was in the LEC, but I am more than willing to defer that to the concept of that whoever serves on LCOG also serves on the Lane Economic Committee. I know that the big work in that is the economic, I'm going to butcher it, comprehensive plan, I think is the big work that's on that committee. So that's what really interests me in that. But yeah, anyway. But I'm willing to defer to the concept of whoever's on LCOG is also on the LEC. So, yeah, excellent. Kevin?
Yeah, just to make it more complicated, I would not be interested in serving on the LEC. So if that were, if that was the board wish that the person do both, I would not be interested in that.
Understood. Lisa?
So I've heard Zach, you've expressed some interest in OCCA.
I'd be willing to do either or both. I mean, if.
But I guess what I'm asking is, are you willing to do OCCA but would also want to do the LCOG ones? Or would you only want to do one or the other?
I'd be willing to take all of them on, frankly, but others deserve roles as well. And so, I'll just say, Kevin, do you have a strong preference for one LCOG over OCCA?
Interesting question. It's like a little game of chess. Do I have a preference? Well,
I think you and I are the two people that are willing to serve on either LCOG or OCCA, and we just need to decide who's going to do which. So if you have a strong preference, then I'll do the other one.
Okay. All right. Well, to be frank, I hadn't considered OCCA. I hadn't thought that would be an interest, but if it were either that or LCOG, okay. To answer your question, I don't know that I would lean, I don't know that I'd have a preference.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Well, why don't we flip a coin? No, I'm similar. I'm sort of on the fence as well.
Okay.
Understood. Coming in, I was definitely like, yeah, LCOG, and then I didn't really realize OCCA was an additional opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
And so appoint one of us to one and one of us to the other.
Okay, understood. I might follow up with just some additional questions for you two and your preferences and stuff. I'd love to gauge that a little bit more before our before the July meeting, of course. And then also, like was mentioned, Kevin Altucker, you're willing to release the KLCC Public Radio Foundation seat. Denise?
So just a question, Kevin, it says that the meetings, I'm referring to KLCC, are held the third Thursday of every month. What's the time frame on those meetings?
They're start at noon, and they're typically an hour and a half, so noon to 1:30.
Okay. I would be interested in that. I would try. I would have to sometimes make arrangements, but that would be an interest of mine.
Excellent. Thank you.
Kevin, are they remotely accessible?
Yes, the meetings are remotely accessible. Most of the board members attend in person, and the meetings are usually held at the KLCC office on 8th Street, downtown Eugene.
Interesting.
All right. Excellent. Okay. I think I have some information here that I can move forward with, and we'll go from there. Next is the board calendar for 24-25. What this so essentially what you have before you is two sets of calendars here. One is for the board meetings and the work sessions each month, and the other one is just if we were to do only one board meeting a month. It was mentioned in the past of the option of just doing board meetings as opposed to board meeting and a work session. And I wanted to bring that up at this point because we have to put forward a board calendar in the July meeting to vote on. So I figured this was the best timing for us to have this discussion of whether if we want to do one meeting a month or continue with the 2 meetings per month. So I will open it up for discussion. Kevin.
Yes, I appreciate you putting the alternative calendar on the agenda. I don't feel like we've had a good enough discussion about the pros and cons of, going to one meeting or, I don't know that we've really fleshed out I don't know that we've done a good job of critical thinking on this issue. I brought up the idea of one meeting per month. It doesn't mean it's a great idea, but I'd like to see more investigation into the pros and cons.
Understood. I was hoping that the discussion today would be kind of flesh that out. I think one of the pros that was mentioned with the one meeting a month would be obviously the cabinet's staff time to preparing for the meetings and stuff like that, give them more time and not having an additional work session would be a benefit to that. Zach?
I'm pretty worried about going to one meeting right now. I feel like there's a lot of things that we have to work on, and that I could easily see meetings going extremely late if we try and cover similar amounts of material in one meeting a month instead of 2. So my preference at this time would be to stick with 2 and to try and get to the point where our meetings are short and streamlined and effective. And if we get to the point where we don't have stuff to talk about, then let's go to one meeting. But I feel like right now there's a lot of stuff to do and a lot of things to discuss. And so I would like to keep with our current process, at least for the time being.
Denise.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with Zach. I'm having a hard time imagining how the reports and the information that we get and Sometimes public comment is lengthy. Of course, you can never predict that. So it's hard to imagine how everything could fit into one meeting a month. There's a lot of change and a lot of things going on. And we need to stay informed. So I think I don't see how it's possible personally, but that's my point of view.
Yeah. Lisa, kind of help with your the critical thinking aspect of this. Before we had work sessions, and Lisa, if you can speak on this, we had ad hoc committees that met and discussed and did work, and they brought that to the board meeting. Am I understanding the history correct?
I wouldn't call them ad hoc committees. For a little bit of history, when I first joined the board, I think we've had some very lengthy meetings with this board, but I think my first meeting was close to 6 hours, 5.5, 6 hours. And at that time, there was only one meeting a month. And we did try this committee structure, but then it was working so that there were actually 3 committee meetings a month and then 1 board meeting. And I think it seemed like staff were they were actually spending a lot more time in meetings related to the board than they had previously. And honestly, what started to happen was board members started attending multiple committees because they were really curious about what was going on in the conversations and what was happening. They were not feeling informed on topics. So it didn't work very well for a variety of reasons. And that's when we moved to 2 meetings. And so that's a little bit of the history. I think the thing that I appreciated and have appreciated about the change was the ability to have work sessions versus formal board meetings. And I know that other colleges that meet once a month, they have a work session prior to their board meeting, right? And they have very lengthy meetings. So, I think the work gets done and, the hours are significant. It just depends on how you want to stack it all up. And for me, I do prefer the flow of the 2 meetings. And I think there's a lot of room for us to get better in our meetings. I think there's a lot of room for us to get better in our meetings. So where we could have 2 shorter meetings and maybe move towards 1 meeting. But I do find the 2 shorter meetings to be more effective for governance purposes.
Excellent. Kevin?
I appreciate those thoughts. And I'd like to hear from staff at some point, because we've been putting words like, well, it would be easier on staff. But we haven't ever heard directly. And I'm wondering, along your comment, to do a better job at the meeting, is there a way to reduce the number of biweekly reports to perhaps monthly reports from staff? I don't know. I'm making that up right now off the cuff. I don't know if that's possible or doable.
Absolutely. Dr. Bulger, in regards to staff time.
One of the things I would suggest to the board is that this can be a retreat topic so that we can go into some detail about board governance and what can be or should be covered in these meetings of the board, and then how the team can support. To directly answer your question, I really do think that a longer discussion would be helpful for the board. One of the things that we did this year was to give the board information related to the board meetings earlier than actually in my first year. That means that the executive team is preparing for board meetings all the time, preparing for board meetings. And so that certainly is hopefully a consideration by the board. But I recognize that the board wants to also look at its board governance. It wants to look at the kinds of topics that it addresses. And maybe an assessment, what we can do certainly is an assessment of the board agendas over the last year, maybe the last 2 years that I've been here, and categorize that information so that the board can see that. So, but I would suggest that the board, since this is a topic, it keeps coming up, is that it takes a little bit longer time to review.
Understood. Steve.
So I also appreciate the discussion. I think, coming into the meeting and thinking about the topic ahead of time, I was, certainly leaning towards one meeting a month. And that might be a little for selfish reasons, or perhaps probably honestly more than anything else. Like, oh, geez, one meeting a month would be nice instead of two. Listening to the discussion, thinking about the kind of board that we are, I think, a big part of it is sort of culturally, what kind of board are we and do we want to be, right? And there are sort of hands, to use the only terms that are coming to mind, sort of more hands-on type boards and more hands-off type boards. We have been for at least the entire time I've been here, and I think a lot longer, a hands-on type board. And I don't think that, anybody's really interested in changing that, certainly, or at least not abruptly. And the only way in my mind to go from 2 meetings to 1 meeting a month and not have it be a 6-hour long meeting would be to make a fairly significant cultural change. And I don't think that's the kind of thing we, are prepared to do on the spot here and would even be beneficial to do, but so therefore I'm in favor of maintaining the basic structure of because I too, like Lisa said, I like the somewhat informality of, let's say, tonight's meeting, right? It does have a different feel to it. I feel like our discussion tends to be flows a little differently. There's some benefits to it. So I guess given our culture, given our history, I can't see supporting going to 1 meeting a month abruptly, but I can. I also heard a sentiment expressed by numerous folks to see about just being more efficient with the time that we have each month. So instead of, I think on average, we're about a 3-hour per meeting type of a board. And there might be I think there probably is some opportunity to shave that down so that the expectation all the way around, staff, board members, et cetera, is something less. And that there might be, a frequency of reports that, reduces the pressure on staff to constantly be producing and in production mode for the board. So that's where I'm at. It's kind of a split the baby thing, like, keep the 2 meetings, but see about what efficiencies we could gain.
And just to throw my 2 cents in, having served on a board that was 1 meeting a month, I do feel that went at Klamath Community College, that was excessive as far as like there was a lot of time spent in just 1 meeting, and I greatly appreciated and felt more informed as a board member with having 2 meetings a month. So I'm in support of that. One thing to just mention in regards to both calendars, but specifically the 2 meetings a month. October 9th is we put it to the 9th because it's out of order, essentially because of what was it? Sorry. It was okay. It was moved in observance to Rosh Hashanah and also the observance of Sukkot. Sukkot. Thank you. Yep. And so yeah, just FYI in regards to the October calendar date. So excellent. All right.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I do think there are a lot of benefits to have a calendar adopted early enough because, as the vice chair, we often find the chair and the vice chair often find themselves working months out with Celia and with the president because that's necessary. So based on our conversation tonight, I'm hearing that at least for the time being, the majority of the board would like to continue with the 2 meetings a month. And I'm wondering if we can move that calendar to the next agenda for approval.
I'm hearing that, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm fine with that. Again, I appreciate the discussion, and it just seemed like we had not had the opportunity to gather enough information. But I would like to follow up on what President Bolter suggested, and I would support this idea of a retreat topic of how to make our meetings more efficient. How do we still satisfy our requirements, but also how do we reduce the load on staff so that they're not constantly preparing for a board meeting?
All right. It's a board retreat topic. Noted. Okay, I see.
And I'm fine moving forward with the calendar at the July meeting. I heard that there was some accommodation made for the Jewish holidays in the fall. I haven't looked at that. I trust that that's fine in the fall. The other thing that has happened in the past is Jewish holidays in the spring. I don't know if anybody's taken a look at that yet.
Celia, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, I reviewed the calendars and I updated all the dates that needed.
Thank you.
All right, Zach.
Recognizing next budget season, there's going to be some conflicts again, at least for my calendar, with City of Eugene Budget Committee on Monday nights. If there is a conversation we can have at some point in the next 6 months about if there is ways that we can tweak the calendar in April, May timeframe to potentially make it so that Siobhan and I can attend both. It'd be appreciated if we could have that conversation.
Understood. I think that could be done. Yeah. All right. So what I'm hearing is moving to the July calendar, and we will go ahead and do that. All right. Last topic is going to be the board officer interest. And now keep in mind, this is not the nomination. This is just, hey, who's interested? So I'll just open up the floor to whoever's interested. And again, this is the board chair and vice chair. Zach.
I am interested in serving as chair in the coming year.
Okay.
Same.
Kevin? And the vice chair role.
I'm just going to say I am the current vice chair, but I am not interested in serving as chair.
Come on. You have other things.
Yeah. Just a little bit, even though I would like to say that at this point in time, I have been informed that it is not illegal for me to continue on the LCC board as a state representative. And I am in the process of seeking out feedback on ethics in that regard. So I am hoping to continue on this board as long as possible because, the institution is and the work that we do on this board is important to me. But I don't see myself serving as the chair. So.
Understood. All right. And
Are you interested in being vice chair? Sorry, Steve.
Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not expressing interest. I'm not interested, but I do think there is value to trying to get ourselves back on the path that we were on, until last year, where we elected a chair, but then when we also elected a vice chair who was then largely, expected to follow into the chair role in the following year. And the value of spending a year in vice chair, and it'll be a little awkward, right, this year if we go in that direction, is that the vice chair gets a year to sort of see what that agenda setting meeting is like, to get the benefit of the experience from the chair who, also would have had that experience. So, there's no way to get back to that without, based on where we're at right now, without the chair not, having that vice chair experience, right? Because Lisa's saying that she's not interested in moving forward with that. But I think there's value to the institution as a whole to have people kind of move through that process, get some experience and comfort, working at that, more intimate level with the chair and president before moving into the chair role.
Understood and noted. All right.
I'm not seeing anyone else volunteering for the vice chair position. I'll just put out there, Kevin, whatever happens, I would be happy to serve as your vice chair or vice versa. I'd be happy to have you serve as my vice chair.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
Whatever happens in the chair position, let's just say that.
Sure.
I'd be happy to.
Yeah. We could bumble through together.
Excellent. Excellent, excellent. And as outgoing chair, I would love to even just like be a part of like the first couple of meetings, just to kind of just to provide advisement, or Lisa can do the same. And we just, whoever's the next chair and vice chair, we want you to feel supported, and we want you to have all the resources you need to be successful. So, Lisa.
And I would like to point out that people come to the role of being chair and vice chair with experiences from other areas. And so it's, you know, I feel confident that members of this board can step into that role of chair without being vice chair. I mean, I was asked to be chair by a board and serve for 2 years after being on the board for a little over a year, and then not having been vice chair. So we all bring experiences and skills that make that possible. Certainly having that vice chair experience is helpful, but I also can say that you will be well supported.
I agree. All right. Thank you for communicating interest there. And next, we're going to go into just board member questions and comments. We do have executive session after this, so but any board comments or questions? All right. Oh, Denise.
I would just like to express my deep appreciation to all those who put together the LCC graduation. This was my first experience of a LCC graduation, and I found it inspiring. All the messages were inspiring, and I'm sure an awful lot of work went into it. I know in rehearsal time, we practiced many times. So there's a lot of people who put in a lot of effort, and I just want to express my appreciation for that. And I think it came off in a very warm, positive, inspiring way.
Absolutely. Oh, Lisa.
Yeah, I also wanted to express my appreciation for the graduation. I mean, I really enjoyed it. And it was very noticeable, the work that went into it, and just the thoughtfulness. It was like you could just see the way things flowed and all the little details that were thought about. And it was really easy to observe and notice the emotion and the energy, and just how celebratory the whole celebration felt for our graduates. So it really was an exceptional event. And I thank you to everybody that worked on it. I know it required a lot. So, and then I also wanted to acknowledge that at our next meeting, we will elect a chair and a vice chair, and then Austin will hand over the gavel. And so, Austin, I wanted to appreciate you for chairing the LCC board for this last year, and the thoughtfulness and commitment that you've demonstrated towards it. I know that you care deeply about community colleges, and so thank you for your efforts in this last year as our chair.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Denise. Appreciate that. Yeah, no, I certainly feel like I was an imperfect chair, but I hope that the biggest thing that I hope that that people got out of my chairmanship was that you were listened to and you were heard. And whether if that was public comment or my fellow board members, I wanted people to be heard. And I think that's a really important part of our democracy. So, yeah. All right. Any further comments, questions? All right, meeting adjourned. We'll be going into executive session after this. 10